Good morning, and welcome back to How to Write Science Fiction That Doesn't Suck. Um, it's a beautiful Wyoming morning here. It's 5 degrees now, which is a vast improvement because about 3 hours ago when I woke up, it was negative 27. And there was ice on the kitchen window, on the inside of the kitchen window. So, yeah, it's one of those brutal Wyoming winter mornings here. But it's pretty. It's very pretty outside. Kind of a sterile, white, snow-covered environment. I can try to show you if you want. Here, hold on. Hopefully this doesn't screw up my. It's not working. It won't focus on the outside. Sorry. Let's try this way. There you go. You can see some of it out there. You can see the snow anyway. Okay. So it's been a while since I talked to you guys. I've been really busy. I've been finishing up Drop Trooper 12, which was book number 61 that I've written. And at the time, I miscounted, and I went on social media, and I'm like, oh, wow, I finished 60 books, and didn't realize, no, this is 61. Number 60 was the last book, and I totally forgot and blew by it. So, sorry. Um, anyway, so I am about to get started outlining for a couple of new series, and in a couple months I'll start writing Drop Trooper 13, which I love the series. I love the fact that it's very successful, but it's daunting. You get 13 books into a series, there's just so much you have to remember about it. Thankfully, the main characters, that's easy, but side characters, names. I feel like I made a mistake in number 12 and kind of memory hold a Tawny destroyer that might or might not have existed. I couldn't find it. I don't know. But knock on wood, hopefully I didn't. So now today, I want to talk about humanizing your characters. This is especially an issue in military science fiction, not so much in space opera. But there's a tendency for people to what I like to call Jack Reacherize their main character, make him this unstoppable badass who never feels pain, never gets hurt, never feels fear. And I'm not going to tell you that doesn't work as far as attracting an audience. I mean, look at Jack Reacher, who I just talked about, incredibly successful. But you may make money from it, but the name of this channel is not how to write science fiction that makes money, because I'm not an expert at that. It's how to write science fiction that doesn't suck. And while there are ways to make a Jack Reacher type of badass character in a book that doesn't suck, mostly they involve bringing in a side character, a secondary character who sees the world from the normal person's point of view and feels the fear and the panic and the desperation that a normal person would feel surrounded by these types of circumstances. That's one way to do it. And you can do it that way. If that's how you prefer to do it in your military science fiction story, to have the main protagonist be the fearless badass and have the normal person's point of view seen from a side character, I won't tell you that you can't do that. But I will say that it's limiting. Let's put it that way. It's limiting. It limits the kinds of stories you can tell. So a much better way to handle this, in my opinion, is to try to find a way to you're not weakening the character, so don't think that you're weakening him. You're just humanizing him. You're making him feel the the passions, the fears, the desperation of a normal person, and you're fitting that in with his nature as a badass, because it's a military science fiction book. People don't want to read about some weak, fearful guy. That's the other extreme you can take it to, is to have some nebbish who doesn't know what he's doing and who doesn't find out what he's doing until the end of the book. And I hate that too. I don't want to read about some idiot. I want to read about some dude who's a badass, but is also human. So there's different ways to handle that, and you can read several authors who will show you ways to handle that. I'm going to talk about how I've handled that because I'm an expert on that part. Let's start with probably the biggest badass that I have ever written in any of my books, Caleb Mitchell, from Glory Boy and the Birthright series, and also in the Psy-War trilogy, which is going to be re-released by Aethon Books soon, sometime this year. Caleb Mitchell is a augmented, enhanced commando who kicks all kinds of ass in all the books he's in, who is basically unstoppable because besides being physically incredibly dangerous and incredibly well trained, he's also got a will of iron. That's what makes him an incredible character, in my opinion. I'm kind of biased, but he has a indomitable will. Basically, he will not accept defeat. He will not accept that somebody else gets away with doing, bad things to people he loves. Basically, if you try to hurt his family or his extended family, you've not just made an enemy, you've created a nuclear weapon that's going to walk into your lap and go off. And it's hard to make a character like that human. And you have to start out early. If you're going to make an unstoppable badass and you want to make them human, you have to start your narrative or your series or your story or your book when they're vulnerable, before they become that badass, and show how it happened. So in the beginning of Glory Boy, Caleb is a outcast who has gone against his family and his religion and has basically been kicked out by his family and by his community. And he is devastated by that. And later on, when he tries to hide that, he becomes this commando, becomes this badass, and tries not to think about that. But when he returns home to free his planet from the enemy that has occupied it, he realizes it still hurts. It's still the pain that's been lingering inside, because despite the fact that he's this badass commando, unkillable, unstoppable, he's still a little boy who's longing for his father's approval. And he's never going to get it because his parents die before he goes back to the planet. And that's something that haunts him the whole book, is he's never going to reconcile with his family, with his parents. He does reconcile with his older brother, which is kind of a proxy for his father, but he never gets the chance to reconcile with his father or say goodbye to his mother. And that is something, though he doesn't think about it every book, that's something that still haunts him all the way through. So that is a way of humanizing a character, giving him a vulnerability that never really leaves. Then there's Randall Munroe. main character from the Recon books, which are also being relaunched by Athon starting in February. Now, Randall Monroe is the opposite of Cam Alvarez from Drop Trooper in that he's a child of privilege. His mother is an executive director of the corporate council, lives in a penthouse far above the city. And even his rebellion against her by becoming close to his great-grandfather, who was old enough to have been a U.S. Marine back when there was such a thing, and his fondness for doing survival stuff outdoors, even that is a rebellion of privilege, because most people in the world in that time don't have the money to do outdoor stuff. They're stuck in the city. Everything that they do for vacation or fun is virtual reality. So he is definitely a child of privilege, but he is also, and he's not an enhanced commando like Caleb Mitchell, but he's also got one of Caleb's characteristics, and that's willpower, a dominant personality. He's even got a more dominant personality than Caleb Mitchell. Caleb Mitchell is the kind of person who you'd never hear from unless you piss him off. He's quiet, unassuming, not loud or boisterous, and he's not really a leader. He becomes sort of one reluctantly, but he's not a leader. He doesn't want to lead. He wants to do the stuff himself. Randall Monroe is a leader. He's a born leader. And maybe that's, genetics, because his mother is an executive director of the corporate council. And maybe she played with his genetics a little too. So that might be part of it. But he is a dominant personality. He's an NCO in the Marines in the first Recon book, and he winds up leading a rebellion on a colony world and retaking it from the Tawnee, the enemy. And he does it because of his force of personality. He's someone who was reluctant to become a leader at first because he was just a corporal in the Marines at the time. But he winds up leading the rebellion. Later on, he winds up in the Psy-War trilogy, as I aforementioned. He winds up being, at the end of it all, basically the leader of the Commonwealth, or what's left of it. Which, spoilers, sorry. So you have a guy who is a born leader, who has an iron will, who is incredibly dangerous, not just for the fact that he's trained and experienced, but he is cold-blooded. Unlike Caleb Mitchell is not cold-blooded. Caleb Mitchell, when he gets revenge or when he has to strike back at people that try to hurt him and his family, he is very hot-blooded about it. He is, he may seem like a killing machine, but inside he's a seething pile of rage when that kind of thing happens, because he's really pissed when people go after his family. Randall Monroe is cold. He is calculating. He is a soldier. Well, he's a Marine technically, but mindset-wise, he's a soldier. He was raised to be a corporate executive, and violence is business for him. Not that it is his business for a lot of the books, but it's a business-like experience for him. He does it, with the kind of detached professionalism that you would find in a sniper. So that makes him very dangerous and also very kind of cold and calculating. So how do you humanize someone like that? Again, part of it is you give them family. One of the things that humanizes Randall, who Randall Monroe, actually I should call him Monroe, that's what everybody calls him, but it's been so long since I wrote his character, you almost forget. One of the things that humanizes Monroe is the fact that he has to latch on to people. His great grandfather was his father figure because he didn't have a real father, and he latched on to him as a humanizing element, something that he could pour his devotion and love into, when nobody else, because his mother was cold and heartless. His girlfriend, before he went in the Marines, was a social climber who only went out with him because of his mother. So first he had his great grandfather, and then he got his girlfriend who became his wife, and and then his son became his whole life. And everything he did to protect them and preserve, their safety and in the relationship he had with them. And even in War, that still is the most important thing to him. His family, his actually his mother starts to become part of that too. But his mother, his wife, his son, they're the center of his universe, and they humanize him. They give him a vulnerability. Whereas Caleb's vulnerability initially was his missing family, the family he no longer had. Monroe's vulnerability and humanity is from the family he does have and the family he's desperately trying to protect. So that's the way I did it with those two. Then there's Cameron Alvarez, who arguably my most popular character in the most popular series. Cam is an orphan who has been on his own since he was a child. Not just been on his own, but in hostile environments where everybody was trying to beat him up or rob him or kill him. And he had to learn to live on his own, which made him cynical, skeptical, misanthropic to some extent. But what humanized Cam, unlike the other characters we just went over, was his friends, is the people he made a family of, not the his wife, one who becomes his wife, of course, but mostly it's the people who he adopted into his world, who made his friends. And what keeps him human through the series is losing those people. He loses a lot of people because he's in a dangerous profession, and a lot of them fall away. They're killed in the war. They're injured and leave. They're not there anymore. And the humanity comes from not just him, marrying Vicky, but the fact that he considered these people family and he feels the pain of their loss. And he feels guilt, not just for their loss, but because he's been thrust into the position of being a leader, people are dying at his say-so, and he feels every death. And every death, it becomes harder for him to give those orders, to send people into danger anymore. So that is another way of humanizing your heroes, having them feel the responsibility for everyone who they sent to their deaths, which you have to do in military science fiction. If you're any kind of military leader, you send people into situations they might die. And when they do, it's the worst kind of pain. So that is another method of humanizing your characters. So what have I gone over so far? Caleb Mitchell, humanized by the loss of his family, by an unresolved conflict with his father that will never be resolved. Monroe, is humanized by his family that he desperately searched for to take the place of the one he really didn't have with his wife and his child. Um, Not so much his friends, honestly, because Monroe's a man who does not make friends easily. He's a leader, and true leaders, understand that people you lead and die, they lead into situations where they might die. Sorry, I'm having a brain fart. If you lead them into situations they might die, if you consider them your friends, it might make you hesitate in a way that would get them killed. It'd be better if you did not get close to them. And that's pretty much how Monroe is. I mean, he feels pain when they die. He feels pain when he loses people, but eventually he kind of builds a callus around that. And the only ones that he clings to are his family, his wife, his son, his mother eventually. So that's Monroe's core of humanity. And then there's Cam Alvarez, who is humanized by his friends, humanized by the fact that he let them get close and then they died and he feels guilty about it. Those are three different situations, three different characters who have three different, very different personalities. Cal Mitchell is a believer. He has incredible faith, not just in God, which he does because he's very religious, but in himself because he has never been beaten and he's never been stopped. He has faith in his purpose. Randall Monroe is not a man of faith. He does believe in himself, but Randall Monroe is more a thinker. He depends more on logic and reason, and rather than just emotion. And he doesn't go into it much, but he's really kind of agnostic, not really big into faith. Then you have Cam Alvarez, who is cynical, bitter, lonely, and lonely in a way that makes him not want to be with anybody else. Whereas Cal Mitchell was lonely for a while, but he was also wanting to replace that family with friends, with relationships. And Monroe was always a loner and never wanted to let anybody in, so he wasn't really lonely. But Cam Alvarez was desperately lonely, and lonely in a way where he pushed everybody away from him. So three very different characters, three ways of making them vulnerable humans who aren't killing machines, who only think about the war and their job. How you will handle this, that's up to you. There's other ways to go about it. Especially at first person, it's easy to humanize somebody, honestly, because you're inside their head. You're thinking with them. So you can give them a humanity easier than with a third person. There's other characters that I've done in third person that it was harder to make human, honestly. There was Jason McKay from the Duty on Our Planet series, and also a huge badass, but more vulnerable because he took every loss personally. He was a good leader, but he was also one of those leaders who led from the front, and when people died under his command, it just gutted him. Whereas Shannon Stark, his second in command, was much more cold and calculating. But when she felt vulnerable was her relationship with him. She was not somebody to let people close, and when he got close, it kind of made her more vulnerable. Then there was Logan Brannigan in Wholesale Slaughter. He was a soldier. He would been trained from a very young child to be the best mech pilot around, but he was vulnerable because he took seriously his responsibility as the future leader of his government, and he felt very, very guilty for being unable to protect them, and that was a way to make him more vulnerable. Um, I mean, he had friends also, and he lost people and things like that. But the core of his vulnerability in that book was the fact that he needed to protect the people first of his government and home, kingdom. I don't know how to put it, but and then also all the vulnerable people, the people who weren't protected by governments. So other people, the responsibility to other people was how he became more human, and that's a few different ways that you can use. Read other authors who you admire and see how they do it. Some of them do it by making their main characters, just like I said, an incredible badass, and the people around them feel the fear. Some don't do it at all, and they've been successful. So, like I said, don't take this as a warning that you won't make money if you don't make your hero have vulnerability and humanity, because you can make money if you're a really good writer. But in my opinion, it's a better story if they have something to lose, if they have a vulnerability. So keep that in mind. And when you're writing your Rambo, make sure that they have a family, they have friends, they have something at the core of their emotions that makes them a real human being that readers can relate to. And I guess that is it for now. I will try to record regularly this year if I can think of more topics. If you have any suggestions for topics, please, 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 please leave them in the comments or email me at dutyhonorplanet487@gmail.com and give me ideas for the YouTube channel. I will come in here and I will make more videos if you give me an idea I can run with. All right. I hope you all have a great year, and I will talk to you next time.